right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to O'Donnell for Liberty again. As always, my name is Justin O'Donnell. Thank you for coming back. This is our second episode titled AJ Hates the Food Pyramid. And now this is a real special episode. This is something I've wanted to do since PorkFest. This is something I've really felt we needed to have more of an elaborate play on. Now, any of you who've ever been to PorkFest or the Porcupine Freedom Festival hosted by the Free State Project should be familiar with what we call Soapbox Idol. Soapbox Idol is an event held every year at PorkFest where activists from across the country get up and stand on a literal soapbox and have their 3 to 5 minute rant with no restriction on topic, and then the judges vote on who had the best rant. And our guest today, Andrew Olding, is running for Congress in New Hampshire's 2nd District. He is active with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and I think the best way to get this going is to let him introduce himself. So bear with me.
There's no noise coming through.
All right, so you just heard AJ there tell you that he wants to end the United States Department of Agriculture. AJ, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you?
I'm doing really great right now. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. So tell us a little bit about you. What prompted you to get up at Soapbox Idol this year? What was it that got you to stand on a literal soapbox to tell people you hate the USDA?
Well, so I'm running for U.S. Congress, right? And one of the biggest things that I really want to achieve out of that run is, what all of us want to achieve, which is a freer society. But I think the biggest issue for libertarians always comes to guns, war, drugs, and things like that. And everyone kind of has their own little pet issues that they really care about, and this one's probably mine.
Why is that? Why is this your pet issue?
Right. So I'm someone who's been most of my life, particularly when I got done with sports at the end of high school, at the end of my freshman year of college, I've been pretty physically unhealthy. But even before then, we can go into it, but as I got older and more, not as I got older, but recently, over the last 14 months or so, I've sort of come to the conclusion that a lot of the health problems that I had earlier in my life were caused by listening to, dietary advice that was given to me by one person or another, or just eating food that my parents cooked for me and whatever else. I never really, ate more fast food than anyone else. I wasn't less active than anyone else as a kid, but I had a lot of problems. And it turns out that I just don't do very well with the standard American diet. And I think a lot of people don't do very well with the standard American diet. And when we can start to get into details,
Well, I can get that. I can emphasize with that. I mean, I'm a bigger guy, but even when I was at my most fit, when I was running marathons, I was running 10 miles a day. When I was in the Army and when I was in college, I was still eating a large pizza a day and McDonald's every night when I was out partying and drinking till I couldn't stand anymore. But I was always under the assumption, everyone had always told me, is well, you're in as good a shape as you are because you run 10 miles a day. It's like you're eating shit food, but you're overcoming it with what you're doing.
Yeah, right. So, but it's funny that you bring that up about the running thing, because there actually are a lot of unhealthy looking runners out there, and and a lot of it has to do with all the foods that runners are told to get into, and we're getting further into the weeds before we even build the background on this. Right. But a lot of that, I think, has to do with a lot of the foods that runners are told to eat. These high carb foods have insanely high glycemic indexes, and so their body stores fat even though they're using just insane amounts of energy. And so a lot of times when you see like a runner who's going along, they'll be handed some type of like sugar packet or sugar drink or something like that to kind of suck that down because they actually physically need the energy right there.
We used to call it goo.
Yeah, and it doesn't even matter how fat they may or may not be. Now, most of them are skinny, but you will run across occasionally a fat runner, and you're just like, well, that's why, because they're following the advice to a T, just all the time.
Right. Now, again, I talked about my love of Soapbox Idol. It's one of my favorite things every year at PorcFest. Your rant was exceptional at Soapbox Idol. One could argue that I believe you won Soapbox Idol, except for the fact that Tom Woods didn't understand the rules on how to judge.
No, Tom gave me a 5. Tom gave me a perfect score. They edited that.
All right, it was still pretty biased judgment. The judges.
Tom gave it. I got the highest score that Tom gave to anybody. So,
let's recap that rant. I mean, let's tell
okay.
everyone here what you told us at PorcFest without a 3-minute timer. Go.
Right. Okay. So essentially what I did at PorcFest was I just started to talk through a whole bunch of health issues that I've had going back to when I was a kid. Really like in 3rd or 4th grade, I got picked on quite a bit, and everyone gets picked on in 3rd and 4th grade. Kids are mean, but I got picked on quite a bit because I would fart more than everyone else in the class. And I wasn't popular, obviously, because of that. There were times I have specific memories as a kid of when someone next to me would fart and people would yell at me like the entire class because that's just how often it would happen. You progress a little further on into life. You get to start hitting puberty, and I had terrible acne, and a lot of people have terrible acne. This is not all that different of a. This is nothing new. A lot of people deal with this.
Acne care, I think, is one of the biggest industries in advertised over-the-counter medicine, isn't it?
And we can actually get into some ways to help with that later on. And like even today, I have pockmarks on my cheeks from when I was 13, 14, 15 years old because it was so bad. I remember times in high school where like I'm just sitting in class and I'll just start bleeding from my face. And it's very hard to have any type of confidence in yourself going forward and whatever else. And I also struggled with weight, and obviously there's a consumption part of that. I understand that I ate more than most people probably should. When I was in high school, I played football at around 230 pounds in high school, and I would drop down to about 185 every year for wrestling, and that would be like this massive extreme drop. And between the end of wrestling season and the next football season, I would add that 40 pounds back on. And it wasn't even like something I had to try to do. It was just the way I naturally ate. And that probably should have been a big indicator to me at that point in time at like, hey, when your football even when your wrestling career gets over, like you can't do one of these without the other right now.
Right.
And it's a big problem. I remember between freshman year of high school and sophomore year of high school, I went to my doctor and I was, I think, 30 pounds heavier than the time that she saw me between freshman and sophomore year. And she said, I'm really not happy about this. I'm like, well, that's not even the half of it. I actually gained 80 pounds and lost 50 in that amount of time. And she just like, are you kidding me? Because I came into high school about 160 pounds, got up to 230.
Okay. I was going to say, I feel like gaining 30 pounds between freshman and sophomore year of high school shouldn't really be that unnormal. That's about the time most kids hit their growth spurt.
Shouldn't be, right? But so, I mean, this is all, so far it's all pretty tame stuff. But
right.
After that time, towards the end of my time in high school and then going into college, I started to develop, I guess, I'm still not 100% sure if it's correct to call them mouth ulcers or like internal cold sores. And I don't have any type of diseases that would cause that. but I would get them from time to time, and it would be painful enough that I would struggle to sit still because like some sore on the tip of my tongue would like accidentally nick against a tooth. And it wasn't even like I bit it or anything like that. It would just be like, oh, all of a sudden now I have this insane amount of pain. And after dealing with this and there were times where this was so bad, like I had difficulty sleeping. And after years of dealing with this, a dentist finally suggested to me, like, hey, I think that you just have an aversion to acidity in your food. And I'm like, okay, so that makes sense. And it works a little bit. It worked a little bit at one point in time to like cut back on tomatoes and things like that. And then when I get to college, I come to find out that I have there was a point in time in college where I actually was doing an all-nighter and I crapped my pants. Just 18 or 19 years old I was at the time. And and around this same period of time, like I kind of knew it was going to come at some point in time because I was having such a hard time controlling any of the way that I had such a hard time literally just controlling my bowels that like I would have to run to the bathroom multiple times a day, not even the poop, just to wipe. Just you have that leak, and so many people have leaky gut and other things like that today that I talk to. It's wild how pervasive that is, but how much more pervasive this issue is than it sounds. But because it sounds horrible, and I get diagnosed with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which is not like really a disease. It's kind of a placeholder that doctors have where it's like, okay, well, you have some kind of inflammatory cause in your gut, and something about the way you're eating is causing this issue. And so he recommends to me to cut back on leafy greens and to cut back on caffeine. And that works pretty well, but I also medicate. That issue never really went away. But so I eventually I found out that the IBS was linked to one of the acne medications that I took when I was in high school, which actually did clear up everything. And then, a year after I get diagnosed with IBS, I start seeing the advertisements on television. Like, did you take Accutane at one point in time? You're entitled to like $1,200 or something.
Did you get a check?
So here's how naive and dumb I was at the time. When I got on that medication, I had to sign away so many things. Like, they wouldn't just let you on it. They would not just let you on this medication. You have to. There were multiple waivers that I had to sign, which no 16 or 17-year-old, whatever it was at the time, should be allowed to sign up for.
Now, how does the FDA go ahead and approve a drug that they know you're going to have to sign away your rights for restitution if something goes wrong with the drug?
I don't mind that, but so the reasoning that I did for not going after the company and joining this class action lawsuit was I was like, they could have easily thrown that on there and I wouldn't have noticed. Like, in my mind, I was naive enough to be like, well, they tested it, they warned me, and so I don't think I have a right to take this money from them, even if the government says I do. This was sort of like an early version of libertarianism in my mind. You kind of see the wheels spinning from a libertarian perspective, but like at the same time, that's really naive to assume like that the pharmaceutical companies are like good natured, right? But I just made that assumption, and so I didn't go after them. Whatever. I have money now. I don't need the money from that. But so I eventually got over the issue of the acne, right, because of the medication. But I was still dealing with flatulence, IBS, like literally having to go to the bathroom multiple times a day just to wipe, and these mouth sores, and they were better than they were at their worst, but I still had to deal with these up until up until the time I was about 27 years old. And I showed at PorkFest last year in 2019, having also, something else I'm obviously struggling with is my weight. I'm over 300 pounds right now. I was over 340 pounds last summer.
So I remember this. I was there for a bit of it. You had a revelation at PorkFest last year. Some stuff happened. We had some conversations with people. We left PorkFest, and you made a decision to try something radical and crazy. Yes. And I mocked you for it for a year. But in the end, I mean, it worked out for you. Above my teasing and above our friends kind of mocking you.
It was literally just, I'm walking around one day at PorkFest, and one person suggests to me, why don't you just try this carnivore diet? Because I was complaining about weight loss specifically. I wasn't complaining about these other issues. Because I had tried Weight Watchers for like 3 years off and on. I had tried various methods of like trying to cut down how much meat I was consuming and other things like that. And so I got on that, and I went and I lost like 20 pounds in the first month and a half being on that. And I didn't even like notice any of the other anything else. And it was maybe like a couple months in that I realized, like, I'm not having to go to the bathroom all that often. And then another couple months after that, I started to think like, oh, the ulcers in my mouth are gone. Like, and then a couple months after that, I was like, my joints feel a lot better than they have in years. And some of that is obviously weight loss, but like a big portion of that can be attributed to just like an increased amount of collagen in the diet, right? Where it's like your soft tissue is just helped out so much. And so what I did was literally stop eating plants. All plant products, I just stopped eating them. And I don't believe that this is like the correct diet for everyone. I don't believe this is like the ideal diet for everyone. But something that I've come across in the last 14 months of just like digging through nutritional research constantly is how much basically everybody fails with the standard American diet, with what they're told to do by the USDA. And
that brings us to your rant. That really brings us to like full circle, a year's journey. You got a lot happier and healthier over the course of a year doing what you were doing. And again, us being the assholes that we are in your friends group, we mocked you all the time. We always made fun of you for your diet because it was, hey, Presto Pasta's got a new monthly special. It's amazing. And you're like, I'll get the sausages again. I'll get the meatballs again. And it's like, man, this fajita is amazing. You should try it. But in reality, I mean, you did what was good for you. You did what worked for you.
And the thing is, I'm also not going to sit here and tell everyone like, oh, I have everything figured out, because like where I am in life is still not perfect as far as my health goes. I kind of fell off everything towards the holidays last year and never really got back on it until PorkFest again this year. So in the last 14 months, basically, I lost 60 pounds. And then the holidays hit, and then COVID hit, and I gained about 40 of that back, and now I've lost about 15 again. But the thing is, like, I can say you can lose weight on any diet. That is, calories in, calories out is not a perfect model, but it's essentially correct, or close enough to correct that we can reasonably say you can lose weight on any diet by just restricting calories enough. So that's not the real thing. But the thing is, like, the second I lose these things, I realize like, oh, I'm less healthy, and I'm having a harder time with all the other issues I described. And
that brings us full circle. That brings us back to PorkFest this year. You got up, you gave your rant. Ties into the USDA. I mean, how is it their fault? How is it their responsibility?
You asked me before why I gave the rant, though. Okay, and I never really answered that question. So I had planned a couple other rants. None of the other two rants that I had planned and actually were of anything that was important, and they wouldn't have scored well. But like, it's not about that for me anyway. It's always about having fun. And then the one rant I had plans about. One of them was kind of X-rated, so we're not going to talk about that. And the other one was like about my being upset that the Dodge Charger still has a Daytona version, even though they don't run in NASCAR anymore. And that was going to be like the rant I was going to go with. And it's pretty funny. I worked on it. But then
I think you would have had a very smaller audience appreciation.
Oh yeah, I would have had a very small audience for that one. But then it just kind of came up where it was like, I don't know. It had very similar revelations to what I had the year before, and I was realizing like, oh, you're falling back off of things. You need to get back on it, and and there were so many other people who talked. There's so many people at PorkFest that talk about their diets. There's so many people in the community in New Hampshire, like the overall Free State Project, that have insane wild diets, and I realized mine is one of the most insane.
So, I mean, what AJ is bringing up there, I mean, that's a fantastic point. That's something I want to drive home. So, I mean, I feel like it's time for a non-sponsor pitch right here. Somebody who's not paying us to tell you how great they are. If you've never been to PorkFest before, come to PorkFest in 2021. It'll be in the summer up at Rogers Campground in Lancaster, New Hampshire. You're going to have some of the best food you've ever had in your life because it's not in a restaurant. It's people. It's their passion. It's what they do. And at one campsite, you'll have somebody making a vegan cuisine that's absolutely insatiating, and like you cannot fathom how good vegetables could be.
Oh yeah,
and two sites over, you have somebody who's just grilling up high-end steaks on an open flame, and this is all stuff done on a community basis and a community level, and it's something that we've really grown to appreciate in our small community here in New Hampshire. Is the number of great cooks and the diversity of the foods and the diets and the cooks, and the fact that we have people like AJ and the other people who embrace carnivore and the keto cult, as I call them, and then the vegan campaign and all the kids that tell you.
On the seacoast.
Right, and it's fascinating because everyone's improving, everyone's getting healthier, but nobody's doing the same thing. And I think you touched on that a lot in your rant about the USDA, that it was the top-down approach and the one-size-fits-all approach that ruined everything. So
that's ultimately like one of the biggest things that I try to have people understand when it comes to diet. I have people all the time ask me for dietary advice, and I hate giving it because I'm so worried that I'm going to tell someone to do something, and they're going to do it, and they're going to have some type of negative reaction to it. And the other thing is, like, I'm not an expert. I researched. All my research has been based on how do I make myself healthier. It's not been based on, like, how do I make the world healthier. But, like, the biggest thing that I concluded from all of this is, like, the concept of an optimal human diet or an ideal human diet is so unbelievably not a real thing. Because everyone deals differently in like how their body processes the food that come in, digests the different food that comes in. One of the biggest problems that I suffered from when it came to the acne or the sores on my mouth or like different joint pains and things like that, and even the GI stuff, was it's inflammation that's caused by that was coming up because of the diet I was eating. And I can easily say like, oh, it's plants, and cutting out all the plants has made me healthier, but there may be things I can add back in. I'm toying around with the idea of adding avocado back in and cutting out dairy, because I feel like dairy's hurting the weight loss, and avocado is not a very high toxicity plant where a lot of others are. So it's not. I'm not looking to be dogmatic about anything either. So I'm very worried that when people ask me for dietary advice, I'm going to give them bad advice. So the thing that I try to always tell people is like, the most important part of your nutritional journey and whatever else is that you're doing research and figuring out how to do things for yourself. I think elimination diets are one of the best ways to start. And there's a bunch of different elimination diets out there. Obviously, carnivore is a very extreme version, but veganism is an elimination diet, or whole food plant-based is what I prefer to call it, because veganism is an ethical choice, and whole food plant-based is a dietary choice.
We can get into mocking vegans at another time.
I don't want to mock vegans. I really don't. And then there's like a bunch of people do Whole30 in the community, and I'm not overly knowledgeable about Whole30, but the entire concept is like cutting down on what the people who came up with it perceive as like high toxicity foods, and then adding stuff back in to see how you do well with. And like my advice is to start with an elimination diet and just do research from there to see how you feel and all that other stuff. Like that's my advice. People come to me and they're like, should I be drinking diet soda? I'm like, I have no.
No.
Like,
I mean, that really brings it back to the root of the issue, though. Is like people are seeing you have success. People is like the weight you've lost has been noticeable for those of us who know you in real life. You're definitely seem like happier and more upbeat about your diet, and you got a little bit of like an evangelist there about it for a while. So is it really a surprise that people are coming to ask you for help when you're showing really positive results and you're really positive about what's going on? And the other alternative is the food pyramid, the top-down approach to one size fits all, what never works for anyone.
Right. And that's the other thing is like, it doesn't always never work for anyone. Like there are healthy there. I mean, I don't believe that there are many healthy people eating a standard American diet, but there are some. But yeah. So I mean, do we want to dive into a little bit of the history of the USDA and the food pyramid?
On you. I mean, I feel like you were the one who got cut off by Carla Garrick at that 5 minutes when you were 2 minutes over your 3-minute timer. I kind of want to know where you were going.
Well, so I was going exactly with where I was. I maybe had a couple more one-liners that I could throw in, but like I got in the points that I knew I could. And it was supposed to be 3 minutes. My speech ended up being 4.5. And like I even saw the timer beforehand, and I was like, okay, please don't yell out when I have 10 seconds up. Just put your hand up, and when that happens, I'll just ignore you.
Right.
But and everyone heard that.
But how did that food pyramid come to be? How did the United States government, whose sole responsibility is the protection of life, liberty, and property, and the administration of the post office and interstate commerce, when did they get in their idea to tell people what to eat?
So the food pyramid came about. The USDA came about around the 1970s, and it was largely based off of something called, what was it, the McGovern Report, I think it was called. Yeah, the McGovern Report. And George McGovern was, at the time, a U.S. Senator from the state of South Dakota. And he wanted to issue out warnings to the American people about what they should and shouldn't be eating. The 20th century was sort of a downturn for chronic illnesses. While we were able to treat more and more diseases and extend life, we started to see more and more people with obesity, with Alzheimer's, with diabetes, things like that. And so this senator really wanted to send out some kind of dietary report to say what was and was not true. And it was very hotly debated. And at one point in time, you can find the film. This isn't an exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, senators don't have time to wait for all of the data to come in like you scientists do before you make decisions. And so he was just like, I'm going to take whatever information is available and just say that's the dietary guidelines. And so George McGovern, I believe he ate a DASH diet at the time. I might be wrong about that. And the DASH diet is a high carb, low fat diet. It's very similar to the standard American diet. He had a staffer working for him. I do not recall the staffer's name off the top of my head, but the staffer was a vegetarian. And after listening to a whole bunch of different doctors come in and give their reports on where they saw nutrition in the world, and all of it was conflicting, by the way. Like all these doctors and nutritionists came in and all gave conflicting reports in the 1970s. And George McGovern and his vegetarian staffer just went and, wrote down what they thought nutrition was supposed to be. And then a couple of years later, a woman named Carol Tucker Foreman, as part of the USDA, came in. I believe she was like the deputy head of the USDA at the time. Comes in, takes the McGovern report, and writes up the food pyramid. She even consulted with some doctors who told her, no, McGovern report's, BS, do not use it. But she based the food pyramid around that. And the thing is, the food pyramid's been very hard to get rid of and very hard to combat in that amount of time. And it hasn't changed a whole lot. I understand it's not a pyramid anymore. It's like on my plate or whatever it is. But the actual dietary guidelines have not changed a whole lot. It's still like roughly 10 servings of carbohydrate. It's still like roughly 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. It's still, minimal amount of fat, minimal amount of protein, minimal amount of refined cane sugar. I agree with the last one. And it stayed roughly the same through that time. And one of the biggest things that stands in the way of it changing has been the USDA, just like many parts of the government, is not about actual human health. There's so many corporate interests. And people can say, like, oh, the dairy industry is massive and the beef industry is massive. But, like, if you really look at, like, dollars to donuts, like
sugar,
the sugar industry, the processed food industry. I'm not gonna like go after like whole food plants here, because again, they're not the problem. It is the processed food industries are so hardly driving the production of corn and wheat and soy that, like, if the USDA changed what they said, like, people would change their diet so radically overnight that we would almost have to overnight redo our farm system in this country. And it's a really scary proposition, but the fact of the matter is the way we do things today makes people unhealthy. So it's not a good idea to necessarily keep it how it is just for the sake of these special interest industries, right?
So what is the answer then? Is the answer a new food pyramid? Is it study to tell people what kind of is the answer to put out some kind of recommended baseline for people to work off of?
I don't believe that there should be any recommended baseline.
Okay.
Because at some point in time, if that baseline is found to be wrong, corporate interests will fight back against it changing. There have been people who've quit their jobs at the USDA saying that they're not allowed to tell people to stop eating certain foods. Like, they're told that, because it would ruin some industry, and that's a major problem. Yeah.
Is that a problem with any government interference, though?
Right.
How are we going to overcome if there is no government baseline? If there's no government put out baseline, what's to stop? Let's say the American Heart Association is putting out their baseline for healthy heart eating. And if that's proven wrong, all of a sudden it's not just corporate interest, it's nonprofit interest.
Like, completely bunk. The American Heart Association, the American Heart Association's Heart Healthy logo is on Cocoa Puffs.
We all know that things can be bought. The Better Business Bureau sells ratings.
Right.
But...
Right, so, like, but ultimately the thing is, like, we can ask, like, what's the better system for telling people how to eat? And the thing is, we were healthier prior to the USDA's existence.
Okay. Well, the brass tacks of it, the fundamental breakdown, where we need to get to, what the whole crux of this is, you're running for Congress. What is the role of the United States government here, and how do you address it as a congressman?
See, I would... Ultimately, like, you have to find people to go along with you on this, but, like, I would like to pass legislation to get rid of the USDA entirely, maybe spin off the fourth system, because, if you ended the USDA tomorrow, like, yes, there would have to be a whole bunch of private industries, like, reorganizing the way they do their farms and things like that. The forest system is a little bit more difficult. And the reason I bring up the forest system is that it is under the USDA. So dissolving that is a much more complicated process. So, some type of legislation that splits the forest system from the USDA, maybe hands the forest system over to the National Parks Department, because, like,
so it's not as simple as a 3-line piece of legislation that says the United States Department of Agriculture shall cease to operate and exist on December 31st, 2022.
See, if that was in front of me, I would vote yes on that. The forest system we can figure out. So it would be, I would add another line, like the forest or the National Parks Department now runs the U.S. Forest Service. Like that would be that would, I'd add a fourth line, and it would be that.
Okay, and I mean, in reality, has there been any good that's come out of the USDA and what they've done? Is there any kind of positive upside that would be losing by getting rid of that government agency?
If there has been a positive outcome from having the United States Department of Agriculture, I do not know what it is. Well, there is some stability in food pricing when it comes to farmers, but that's also such that the government is subsidizing it in ways that real market incentives don't ever get to these farmers. Yep. They're just growing what the government tells them that the government will buy from them. So no, not really. Like there's that problem that you have to overcome, but that's not a positive. That is an effect of the market that has to be overcome when we get rid of it. It's not, yeah.
Well, again, you guys have heard it. I mean, a little bit more in depth in the 5 minutes we got at PorkFest, a little bit more in depth in the 4.5 minutes you got on YouTube or Facebook Live from AJ. But that we need to get rid of the United States Department of Agriculture, and that's just one of many. And again, AJ's, this is his pet issue. This is his libertarian moment to shine and tell people why the government sucks with something that he knows the most about, because he has literally put thousands of hours into figuring this out for himself, and I've sat there and watched him. AJ, how can people get involved in your campaign?
You know what? Contact me on Twitter and we'll figure out how to make that happen. This is my first time running for office, and I'm still trying to figure out how to run a campaign. What I've been telling everybody is to go help Justin O'Donnell with his campaign, because I'm going to be latching onto his campaign for a lot of my campaign stuff, because I'm still trying to figure this out myself.
That's the way to do it. It's 2020. It's the year of COVID. It's something new, something fun. My team, what we're doing is trying to put together an idea of how to have some new events to push the boundaries of the safer at home orders in a complete and utterly safe way. AJ is going to be there with us. I know we have a farmers market coming up in a couple weeks. His Twitter handle at Andrew Olding, scrolling on the bottom right now. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Hit him up there. AJ's very active on Twitter. He will respond to you. He will engage with you. And he will argue with you if you push him and you really want that argument. I've seen it happen. Other ways, make sure you look at the Jorgensen campaign, Joe20.com. That's where we're going to be latching on. We're going to be doing that as well, since I'm running for the United States Senate. Again, this is the O'Donnell for Liberty show. This is our campaign show. This is us pushing forward and helping to get the word out about libertarian candidates here in New Hampshire. We're going to be working as proxies. We're going to be helping Joe Jorgensen push that threshold and bring the libertarian message to every voter in New Hampshire this year as well. If you want more information on my campaign, again, you can visit O'Donnell2020.com. 2 big gold buttons right on the front page: donate, volunteer. Both of them are really important. If you're out of state, you can't volunteer, you can't get on the ground for us, but you want to help financially contribute, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire just spent $15,000 on a ballot access drive. Now, what does that mean? It means me, AJ, Zach, Dara, we're all going to be on the ballot this year. Everyone in New Hampshire is going to have the chance to vote for us, but it costs a lot of money, and we got a lot more to do to get there. If you want to wear your support, again, snackswag.com, and I'm going to bring it up right here. You can go see what we have here. We've got merch for AJ, we've got merch for me, and we got merch for Joe. This is our official merch store for the campaigns. You can look it up. AJ's got this awesome logo. The Olding for Congress, Appeal to Heaven. If you're not familiar with the Pine Tree Revolt in New Hampshire, something you might want to look into, but this is the deep cuts of political logos here with what AJ is putting out, but it's available in any color you want. Just go to snackswag.com.
Red one is the most flavorful.
Red one's the best. Red one's my personal favorite myself. But we do have a full suite of election merchandise that you can order on snackswag.com, including sweatshirts, face masks, beach towels, and T-shirts for O'Donnell for Senate, Joe Jorgensen 2020, and Andrew Olding for U.S. Congress. Now, before we part, Andrew, any final thoughts? Anything you want to pitch?
Yeah, I got one final thing I want to say. That's another way the USDA has screwed over everything that is not, what I've already covered, and it's not diet specific. Like I said before, it was mentioned before, the Forest Service is also under the USDA. The Forest Service has been, I don't know about nationwide, but at least in New Hampshire, has been closing down several trailheads. The trailheads they're choosing, I cannot for the life of me figure out what their motivation is. Specifically, I can tell you for a fact the closing of the Crawford Connector is only going to make it so that there are more people on the Crawford path, which means because that trail is owned by New Hampshire and part of their state and for their state parks department, and so it's just the closings are very obviously done in such a way that it's going to result in more people on trails and more transmissions of COVID. That I don't understand what's going on. Like,
so you're saying the government is not efficient or straightforward or making sense in the arbitrary shit they're doing.
Yeah. And if I can make one more comment on the whole COVID thing, we're seeing today, while this COVID thing is happening, that obviously people with comorbidities are having a harder time dealing with COVID. If you're eating healthier, you're going to have a lesser chance of having a comorbidity. Since the USDA came out with their dietary guidelines and some people actually followed those dietary guidelines, we've only gotten bigger and fatter as a community, which is only going to result in more COVID deaths. So more
COVID deaths are more deaths in general. I feel like that's just a generally good concept. You argued, me and you had a hypothetical, theoretical argument where neither of us are doctors when you kept bringing up the data points that people with higher levels of vitamin D were showing up less than active COVID cases. And I said, well, that's just because they're outside and they're active. They're just healthier people.
So there's a massive correlation between vitamin D and showing up in hospitals right now. The only reason that I don't think it's just people going outside is that not everyone collects vitamin D at the same rate. And you don't see anyone at those higher thresholds. So I think you don't see anyone in the hospitals at those higher thresholds of vitamin D. So I think even the people who are sitting at home just supplementing are even better off than the people who are not. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what the data seems to point to me. We live far enough north that it's very difficult for us to get an ancestrally consistent amount of vitamin D. And now I'm getting super into weeds about nutrition. But that I really recommend that anyone who lives as far north as you and I do, or we live in southern New Hampshire, should probably be supplementing vitamin D all the time. And I think especially during COVID. But who knows? Ivor Cummins has talked a lot about this. He's a nutritionist from South Africa. It's very easy to find his work on this issue.
All right. Well, AJ, thank you for joining us tonight. Okay. It's a pleasure to hear you. Pleasure to have you expand upon that rant as always. And to everyone watching at home, whether you're watching on Facebook Live, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, everything's going to be uploaded later. Check the links in the description. Okay. We're going to have links to how you can get more involved with the campaigns. That's going to be the site, O'Donnell2020.com, ODONNELL 2020.com. Make sure, again, follow AJ, scrolling right below you, at Andrew Olden on Twitter. Okay, as well as links to how you can support us. Social media is a big deal. If you can head over to the Facebook page, share this content, spread the message with your friends. Follow us both on Twitter. Share that content, spread the message with your friends. Help us beat the algorithms. Help us beat the fundraising minimums. Again, YouTube, link in the description for those of you on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to that channel. We can't beat the algorithms and we can't get our content live and in front of people until we have enough subscribers. Now, we're new to this. It's a new channel and a new program, but let's get it going. And if you want to support this channel, if you want to support this through the election, beyond the election, and into the future with just some more Liberty content constantly being brought to you, Patreon link is in the description as well, and you can help us fund this and make this something permanent. And again, always remember official swag for the campaign and just general libertarian swag. Main sponsor, snackswag.com. Great selection, great variety. I've ordered a bunch there. They are experiencing some severe shipping delays due to the COVID, but they do seem to be recovering from that now. But once again, thank you, AJ. Thank you, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, Libertarian Party, and all of the viewers at home for helping us make this work. I'm Justin O'Donnell. This has been O'Donnell for Liberty. Thank you for helping out.